mountain part of it. When I got your book some
Mhm.
time back, the first thing I was like, is that a real name thing, or is that like a what do you call that? Like what do you call those words? It's like it's not the real name, like the nickname. Like is that
No,
like it's like a
so
real name or nickname?
yeah, thanks for the ask. It's one of those very multifaceted things, right? So my last
Okay,
name is Hill. Okay, so there's
right.
a lot of Hills, there's a lot of John, there's a lot of John Hills. Okay, and so when I decided to start putting some of my ideas out there, right?
Hmm.
I'd already done the entrepreneurial thing with my business partner, and I'd already gone through my changes of putting down all the hustle mode, and I know better than everybody else, and you can force people into stuff and everything. I'd already made all those changes.
Mm.
And we were wrapping up doing an affordable website business that we were working on together. And so I was like, cool, I want to go spread my ideas, right? This has been so helpful to me. I want to go help other people and kind of run into the gap. Well, John, you weren't a setter first, and no, I was full cycle and getting it done, and so
Mm.
there was all that kind of, well, if you want to go all the way back to the beginning, and I was like, I don't really know that I want to go do all that, so let me get ahead of that a little bit and start
Hmm.
posting my ideas. And so I started a blog and then was trying to think of a cool name for a blog, right? And John Hill
Hmm.
was not gonna ever be found by anybody,
By anybody
and
ever.
so like thinking about it, and I'm a martial arts guy from a very long time, and so studied a bunch of Chinese martial arts, and so the concept of finding your path up the mountain is very relevant
Hmm.
in Chinese martial arts. And so
Hmm.
doing this work, I'd climbed to the top of the mountain, I thought, but I was still on the path. I'm still like trying to improve every day and be a little bit better and stuff. And so it all kind of came together with John Small Mountain, and that was the blog. And then people started referring to me as Small Mountain, and then we decided to change the LinkedIn name to Small Mountain because once again, there's a thousand
Wow.
hills. And then we
So it
decided
caught
to put
on.
it on the book.
It caught fire.
Yeah, it caught on, right? So what's funny is like a couple of years ago, my daughter comes home from school and she goes, Dad, why didn't you tell me you're famous? And I said, I'm sorry. What do you mean
Ultimate
famous?
compliment.
Yeah.
Ultimate compliment.
And she's like, well, I Googled you at school. And it's like, first, you should not be Googling anything your teachers don't want you to Google. And I
Right.
was like, okay, so what happened? She's like, man, I looked up John Small Mountain. You're the whole first page. And I was kind of like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, did you look up John Hill? And she goes, yeah. And I said, did you see me? She goes, no. And I said, you know how I know I'm not really famous? Because my work name is the thing you're finding, not my real name, and that's totally okay.
Mm.
And so we kind of had to have a conversation about, SEO with like a middle schooler because she doesn't understand any of this stuff,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, it just kind of stuck, and now people call me small. I'm also 6'4", so it's kind of like a walking contradiction because I'm a pretty big guy, and so there's
That's
the
like big
small.
guys that you call tiny, right?
Exactly. Yeah, kind of the same thing. Yeah. So
Mm.
multifaceted, it's been a really interesting journey of trying to make the nickname stick so that way,
Mm.
it wouldn't just be like, "Oh, do you know who John Hill?" Well, I know a lot of toilets. I know a lot of hills
Well,
and
let's.
everything. So, just trying to keep it a little original.
I think that's a really cool story. I like that. Um, and it kind of perfectly segues because there are two things that you shared that I really like. That I want to kind of touch on, but I want to start with the thing you said that you got from martial arts, which is finding your own path up the mountain. And then
Oh, yeah.
I want to use that by asking a question. Do you feel that sales and selling is more art than science or science than art?
Oh my gosh, man. I love this question because over my time, I've shifted on this pretty significantly, right? There
Mm,
for a long time, when I was not taking sales seriously, I thought it was all just science, right? Enough leads with a
mm,
conversion point. And I think that that's where most people kind of start, and that's where a lot of people stay stuck. I got really, really lucky in the form of getting an opportunity to go work with someone from my kung fu school, right? And it was my
mm,
first field sales role, and
mm,
I had all the optimism and none of the skills necessary to really make an impact in the way that I
mm,
wanted to. So I was working in the field. I'm trying to sell to doctors. I'm waiting tables at night so I can pay for daycare for my little girl, and
mm.
because I'd taken a pay cut to go do this job, and so I was
Right.
just excited about the opportunity. I'm selling like spinal screws to surgeons in the OR. Like it's,
Spinal screws.
oh yeah, I have one right here actually. So like I would sell these things to surgeons, and then
That is scary, bro. Of
oh dude, it's terrifying, right? And these surgeries were huge and massive. And so
course.
I'm trying to do that and I'm trying to learn all these things. And I'm working for a friend of mine that I know from martial arts. I'm his martial arts instructor, right? Or one of the
Mm,
assistant ones. And it was so frustrating because he didn't have what I needed to really get to the level of performance that he was looking for, and I wanted to have in the
mm,
seat. So then another friend of mine from the same martial arts school, he comes up to me and he says this line. He goes, "Hey, John, you know that sales is just like kung fu?" And I said, "Shut your mouth. It's not.
mm.
Sales is just the job that I do so I can afford to come to kung fu. But please stop ruining kung fu with this idea that it's just like selling." And he just wouldn't shut up about it, right? So, we kept hanging out, and then I started to see some of the parallels and everything. And I was like, okay, where are you getting
Hmm.
this from? And he was like, you should come meet my coach. And I was kind of like, who needs a coach? While I'm coaching him, right? So the ego and the
Right,
dissonance is like
right,
sky high,
right,
right?
right.
I get off my butt, I go meet the coach. He blows my mind. And I go back to my boss and I was like, hey, this was awesome. We need to, like, I would love to work with this guy. And he was like, nah, you just need to keep pushing. Just need to keep pushing, which is what a
Hmm.
lot of sales reps struggle with whenever they realize they're not on the level. Then they go back and they ask for some help or some training or some coaching or
Hmm.
enablement and things like that. And
Hmm. Very
ultimately,
true.
I decided that I was going to leave that job because I was tired of like not finding the success that I wanted. I felt like I was failing for a buddy of mine. And then
Hmm.
that's when the other guy was like, finally, man, I've just been waiting for you to be done with that. You want to come work on this thing over here? And I was like, man, I would love to, but I got to be really honest with you. Now that I know how much I don't know,
Hmm.
I don't know how we're going to find success in this thing, and I don't want to fail for you. And he was
Right,
like, I'm going
right.
to put you in the coaching. And I was
Good
like,
intentions for
let's
sure.
go. And so I worked with a coach for 8 years and brought all the same nerdy stuff that was helping me in my kung fu path and my martial arts training path over to this path for the first time, right? Because
Hmm.
it's super easy to come into sales and you're not really sure that it's your lane yet. And when you've not committed to the path of it, if you've not decided to make it your craft, you're looking for the shortcuts, you're looking for the tactics, you're looking for the gimmicks, you're looking for all of that stuff, and it'll help you. But ultimately, if you don't care about the job, if you don't care about the product or the avatar, if you don't have confidence in yourself and everything else like this, you're not gonna find success in these roles. And so
Hmm.
now I went from it's all science to
Right.
it's about half, and now it's like
Happening
80-20, right? So 80% of
in
it
favor
is
of.
the mental side of it, right? Of the art and understanding like how you communicate, how you broadcast, how you show up in conversations, and also
Hmm.
your your unintentional, unaware patterns, right? And everything else past that is the other 20%. So
Mm.
shifted a lot in that frame of mind pretty over the years.
I remember what you're sharing. What you're sharing reminds me of a quote, which was, "Communication is the response you get back."
Mm,
Right.
yeah,
So what you share, what you say, what you think you're saying, and what you actually get back are not always one and the same. And really,
yep,
really great communication is the alignment between those two. Or what you're
absolutely.
actually sending out and projecting is the response you actually expected to get back.
Yeah.
So that's really, really powerful. And I think that what I wanted to kind of double back on something that you said is, like, when you were going through the process, he lays out this way of thinking, this suggestion of sales kung fu. Like, what
hmm
were some of the things that you were seeing as you were moving out your life, that you started making those connections? Like, what were some of the connections you saw between the two?
Oh man. All right, so we're about to get super nerdy here, right? Because what I have
This is the
found
platform for it, right?
epic. Okay. What I have found is the same mindset issues create high performance in every lane that I've studied, right? Because while also
Mm-hmm.
being a martial arts guy and being an assistant instructor in Kung Fu, I was also a professional poker player, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so there's elements, there's things you just have to like, and this is the mindset conversation, right? Which is not always super popular in sales, but mindset does matter,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
If you're training kung fu or martial arts in any kind of aspect and you're scared to get hit, you're not going to fight well, right? If you're scared to lose the
Mm-hmm.
deal, you're not going to sell well. If you're scared to lose the pot, you're not going to play well, right? And so that level of detachment was really something that I never really had the room to appreciate in a sales role. And so I would get fixated. I would get very focused, and then I would get needy, and then I would come across as those things. Now, I thought I was being very clever when I was offering discounts.
How do you define detachment real quick?
Great
Like what is your
question.
thought process on detachment?
The way that I think about it is a great conversation is enough, right? I can only do
Mm,
what I can do, right? I can only make a connection with someone who's open to connecting with me. I can only talk well with someone who sees me at a same peer level as them, right? Some people love to put
mm,
salespeople down a couple of levels. Sometimes salespeople do it to themselves, right, with their
mm,
language and how they show up in their calls and stuff like this. But ultimately, you should be really good at what you do, and you should be able to broadcast that. And my coach was always talking about this thing called equal business stature, which was a brand new thing for me to kind of even understand because I'm an introverted guy, right? I'm not this
mm,
gregarious extrovert who's out here talking to everybody. I'm not anywhere close to the natural born salesperson, which I don't really think exists anyway. And so being able to step into that space of like, okay, you're allowed to be good at what you do. I'm allowed to be good at what I do. I've been here before. So
mm,
let's make sure through this conversation that expectations are aligned. You know what you need. And if you don't know what you need, maybe I can help you find what you need because some deals are just not going to close and some deals
right.
shouldn't close. Being able to find clarity
Mm.
so we can save time is the master skill.
Said it one more time.
So if we're just pushing for yes and yes and yes and yes and yes and yes and yes, right?
Mm,
We're going to get caught up in some cost. We're going to get caught up in all of these things and we're going to fixate on it. And when we think about how most people view salespeople, right? We're going
mm,
to do anything, we're going to be anything, we're going to say anything to get a deal done. When you can show up and communicate your standards, communicate that you're a professional, communicate that you're ethical and you're doing the right thing for the company you're representing, for yourself in this conversation, for them, then what happens is if there's an opening for them to appreciate that, conversation goes down a level, right? We get deeper
mm,
much quicker. But if you don't
mm,
know how to do that, and if you're not practiced at it, and if you don't do it a lot, or if you don't
mm,
think you should have to do these things because people just like you and they just buy from you and you're smarter than everybody, you won't do any
mm,
of these things. And then we
mm,
have to start like way up here in the shallows, and people don't trust us and they're concerned and they just want to get away and they just want to collect information and do different things like that.
mm,
Let's talk about it, you know? So, but I can't force anybody to want to have that conversation or treat me that way. I can control how I show up and I can control how I run my conversations and the questions I ask and the process that I follow and different things like that. But I can't make someone get past that mode of like, okay, well, I
mm.
just want to grow. Okay, cool. What happens if you don't grow? John, you don't got to worry about it. Okay, cool. I can go. We don't have to keep
So do
talking.
you, so would you say that detachment is equal to focusing in on process instead of outcome?
100%. Yeah.
You would agree
Mhm.
with that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Right. Like,
Okay, and process in your mind is great conversations is enough. So how do you define a great conversation? Going to focus more on
yeah,
the sales side first, and then we'll
for
kind of
sure.
move over into more general terms.
Yeah. Sales side, you have to broadcast your objectives and why you're here, right? And why they're
Hmm.
there, right? And you got to make it
This is
really
your framing
okay.
of the call kind of stuff,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Right. Setting the agenda, setting the agreements right on the front side of the call and,
Hmm.
clearing it so that way they're not worried about, oh my God, am I going to get a lot of pressure on this thing? Right. So
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
they're thinking about everything and how much they hate salespeople and everything, they're not really there present
Hmm.
with us. Right.
Yeah, they're
If
not
we're just
listening to
thinking
you.
about the next question that we're supposed to be
Hmm.
asking, we're not really present there with them. Right. So
Exactly.
a good conversation is here's my agenda, here's what I'm here to do, and let me broadcast all this and let me make sure that you buy into that first of all, because if you don't buy into that, what are we here to talk about, right?
Mm,
And so if there's little signals excuse me, that you can collect through the call to indicate that you're being seen as someone who's got some subject matter expertise, and hopefully you do, and that, they can open up and they can have trust with you and different things like that. Now, certain people just won't ever trust salespeople, right? You can make a choice to continue to sit there in those conversations and try to build those relationships and try to find a way to crack the nut, or you can put it down and go find someone who's giving you those signals that they do see you as a professional, they do see value in this thing, and they're open to talking about the stakes of making a bad decision.
hmm. 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 I think this is I think you and I are aligned in that regard because I spend a lot of time focusing in on like the stuff like psychology,
Hmm.
influence, persuasion, communication, decision making.
Yeah.
And one of the books I'm reading specifically on decision making talks about that decision making process is slowed down when they're in a new environment
Oh
and
yeah.
they don't know what's coming next.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of back and forth even in our community, in our space about, setting agendas and like opening up
Yep.
the frame with some opening up the call with some type of structure. And sometimes it is seen as, it's a waste of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what would you say to someone who's like kind of like on the fence of whether or not to set an intention or a frame at the beginning of the call versus like kind of
Oh
run
my
through and
gosh.
winging it?
Stop being stupid. Honestly, right? It's your ego, and
Mm-hmm.
for some people, it's your fear of rejection, right? I
Mm-hmm.
know I know some really stellar salespeople, right? And they won't even use a thing like it's called a permission-based opener. Hey, is it okay
Mm-hmm.
if I tell you what we're here to talk about today? They refuse to do that because it might lead to like, hey, no, I'm not interested. They would rather
Mm-hmm.
bulldoze in, get
Mm-hmm.
hung up on, so that way they can find a reason to blame the other person. That's not ownership.
Right.
That's not high levels of selling. You might as well just go work at a car lot on a used car lot, or try to go find some way to kind of just one call close people and things like that. It doesn't work at scale, right? And it doesn't work
Mm-hmm.
if you're selling anything complex or anything that is subjective or anything to where expectations can be misaligned, so
Mm-hmm.
if you're resistant to it, what I would advise you to do is do a personality assessment, right? Because a
Okay.
personality assessment will show you where
Yeah.
you're going to naturally be strong and where you need to work on developing yourself, right? This
Give me an
version of me,
example of like
yeah,
personality and development.
absolutely, right? So my personality is I'm more of an engineer than I am a salesperson, right? So when I think
Okay.
about process and repeatability and consistency, I mean, it's all there for me easily, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But also along with that, I love being right. Oh my God, I love being right, okay? And so that can mean
Guilty.
that I won't take any action until I think I'm right, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
as a salesperson, if you're waiting for it to be perfect, you're going to miss the window. If you're a founder and you're
Mm.
waiting for it to be perfect, you're probably building something in your white tower away from the people that you're trying to help. And then you've got to be good at sales to be able to launch a product and launch an entrepreneurial idea if you don't actually sit and talk with people before you start building, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's that whole thing, right? Show up, communicate your expectations, communicate your objective, so that way you can have a better conversation. Data shows time and time again, right, that whenever people opt into the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
completion rates go up, right? And also completion into like later stage calls, right? So if you have a
Mm-hmm.
multi-call process, they will
Mm-hmm.
get deeper more consistently. But you can keep trying to bulldoze everybody. I hope you have a list big enough to support that because it's probably not going to work out the way that you think that it is.
Right. And another thing I just kind of tag onto that is just like when it comes to building rapport and building a connection, Um, part of this is just predictability. Like they know
Hmm.
where they're going, so they feel safe enough to, okay, so we're
Yeah.
going down this line and things like that. Um, yes, you can focus in on like the more how to win friends and influence people's style of communication at the beginning, which is like, how's family, how's this, how's that. You could do that, but it's
Hmm.
far more effective as a leader, as an authority on the call, a person who's trying to guide them to their own version of transformation. So,
Yeah.
like I said, we're going to build rapport by helping you to feel safe and comfortable in an environment as we're moving through. Would you agree with that or no?
So how you frame and how you set the agenda and how you set the agreement is one of the most nuanced things that I work
I
with
agree.
people on, right? Because
I agree.
I learned a very robotic script for setting agendas and setting agreements and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of this, Pierre, you're going to let me know if you want to move forward or if you want to go die in a grease fire. Is that going to be okay for our call, right? And it's like, okay, like everybody's got to start somewhere, but like, you know,
That agrees, fine.
especially
So
in
great.
in B2B, right? Because like
Mm-hmm.
most of my clients are in the B2B space. I try very hard to stay away
Mm-hmm.
from B2C at this stage because in B2B, they've had all of these conversations before, right? And every new sales rep is like, "Watch this. I got this super cool script." And like they're like, "Oh, I know what that
Here
is.
we go.
I've seen that before. It's this thing, right? And then if you
Hmm.
push too hard, you just get put on the blacklist, right? Like
Yep.
when I was selling the medical devices, I was talking with someone and they were like, "Okay, who are you with?" And I gave them the
Hmm.
name of the company and they're like, who do you distribute for?" And I gave them the name and they pulled out this little book and I said, "Oh, what is that?" And they're like, "Oh, this is a list of people that we'll never take a meeting with." And I was like,
Mm.
"Oh my gosh, that's a thing?"
And he's trying to see if you were on that list.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, man. Like it's like the things you can get away with in a
Mm.
B2C sale because they're not like educated, informed, regular
Hmm.
buyers, right? So they don't know how to
Hmm.
negotiate, they don't know how to haggle, they don't know how to like just shut down a salesperson who's, just
Hmm.
kind of like running on some fake it till you make it stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you make the jump to working in B2B, these people have been through it and they're not going to put up with
Hmm.
it because you have a shiny new script or a shiny new technique. You have to be able to
Mm.
have that connection. And
Right.
it's one of the things that I talk about with people because I even talk about it in the book, right? Because I was running agendas and agreements and everything else like this at the top of my calls. And then there was this one person, right? And I said, "Hey, I might have to tell you no at the end of this." And they
Hmm.
got mad because they actually had some status. They had some
Right.
following and things like this. And so
Right. Right.
and they
Right.
had never dealt with a salesperson who might tell them no, so
Right.
they got pissed. And because
Right.
I was unprepared, and this is the first time this had happened,
Hmm.
I didn't know how to deal with it, right?
Hmm.
And I remember going back and talking to my coach about it, and he was like, "Oh, next time you'll mean it." And I was like, "What does that mean? I meant it that time." And he was like, "You didn't because you didn't have a response, and you weren't willing to be like, hey, okay, we don't have to run it that way. Should I go?" And I was
And
like,
that's a good
"Oh,
point. That's a good point to focus on. It's like there is going back to the statement we made a bit earlier about art and science in the beginning, focus on tricks and tactics and things like that, but not thinking through
mm,
like what these things mean, what could happen as a result. It's like it's like I was watching this movie one time and this guy had lost his gun in the movie. He had lost his gun.
mm-hmm,
And this girl brings him a gun, a new gun. And so as he's walking out the house, he shoots like this random poor innocent stump in the yard. And she's like, "What was that?" And he says, "You never bring an untested weapon into the field."
And there's a really cool movie. It's an older movie. It's called Armageddon, right? And it's got Bruce
Hmm.
Willis and Ben
Bruce Willis,
Affleck and
yeah.
everything. And there's this scene, right? So they're sending these like oil crews, or this one oil
Mm-hmm.
crew to an asteroid, right? And so they
Mm-hmm.
give him like the NASA truck kit thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they walk in and they're ripping it apart, right? Like this is like a multi-million dollar thing that's been built in a lab. And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Well, we're making sure it's going to work, you know?" And
Exactly.
I spent some time in the military and never had to deploy or anything like that. But there that
What
same thinking
branch?
is there. I was in the Army, Army
Mm-hmm.
Reserves, and so you test everything, right? You test yourself, you
Mm-hmm.
test your material, you test these things, you test it for like what causes it to break. So that way you're not thinking about any of that in the heat of the moment. You're just prepared, poised, and ready to go. And so a lot of the sales techniques that people are like handing, you only need one thing, right? And all these videos that people are launching and stuff. And it's like you need more than one thing. And you probably don't
Yeah.
need that thing at all until you can have a good conversation and connect without using any techniques or tactics, right? Techniques and tactics are used to speed up the process and help us drive clarity faster and save time. If you're using them just to shut deals, you're on the wrong path.
Mm, mm, exactly, exactly. I think that this is like a perfect segue. I want to we're kind of far away from now. I was going to go back and talk about like what are more some of the more insights you got about kung fu and sales and selling.
Sure. Yeah.
I know we've already talked about like detachment. I really, really like your definition of it. It's like the idea of detachment is because a lot of people use this word detachment, but
Mhm.
they don't know what it means. I mean, you're applying a term that is unfamiliar in this landscape,
Oh
and yet
man.
they said
Yeah.
just go ahead and do that. And you're like, yeah, but how do you do it? It sounds great, but
Yeah.
how do you do
So
this? So I really
yeah.
like that.
Let me give
So
another example on that because
sure.
I do think that the detachment concept is one of the hardest things to really wrap your head around, right? You
Hmm.
should set your goals optimistically, right? Not
Hmm.
too optimistic, right? Because if you don't have a plan or a path to hit that goal, it's probably not a good goal, and you're probably saddling yourself with some negative energy, right? Some negative thinking and stuff.
Hmm.
Now, it should get you a little motivated, right? So, but we have to be careful of not having a plan or a path. I've done this to myself
Mm,
a number of times in my sales career. I've like, watch this, and then, what? So don't do that to yourself. But the way that I talk about it with people is I found it as a poker player, right? Because
mm,
I had a coach whenever I was trying to play poker full time. I played poker full time for like 9 months and then
mm,
decided it just wasn't the path for me long term. And I had this coach, and he goes, you can play a bad hand and win. It doesn't mean that you made good decisions. It means you got lucky. And you can have the
mm,
best hand and still lose, and it doesn't mean you did anything wrong, right?
mm.
And that
That
was
is good.
yeah,
That's
it
good.
was a huge lesson in poker, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then I was able to see it in my martial arts training, right? Like getting hit
Mm-hmm.
in a sparring match or in a fight or whatever doesn't actually mean that I'm losing. It probably means that I'm in the fight, kind of thing.
Exactly.
But you have to shift your thinking. You have to reframe that for yourself of what is really a loss. And so
Defining the game in winnable terms.
absolutely, for sure. And
Ah, yeah,
so
that's good. That's
that
good.
so now spending that time in poker and realizing that like, man, you can play the hand perfectly and just that one card comes that causes you to lose. And it doesn't mean you did anything bad. It means you sometimes just got unlucky. There's that
Mm-hmm.
same aspect in sales, right? Way back in the
Mm-hmm.
day, I was that guy who was trying to say anything to get the yes and everything, right?
Right,
And then
right.
I would sometimes tell people exactly what they wanted to hear and they still didn't close. And I just felt like
Exactly.
garbage.
Right.
So I remember the last time I just blatantly lied to a prospect, right? And I was like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
never doing that again.
Right.
And now I know what's at stake. I know how we can help. I know where the walls are. I know where the most objections are. So we need to preempt those and diffuse those so we can have the right
Mm,
conversation on the right terms. But ultimately, I follow my process. The cards fall where they may because I don't have any control over that.
mm. That's good. That is really good. I really
Thank you.
like that. I really like that because again, it reinforces the idea of like, hey man, the outcome will take care of itself. And it's not something you can directly control. Like you can't reach into someone's brain and like
100%.
make them say yes. And so focusing on things you actually can control, things you
Hmm.
can measure and manage all the time. I was listening to Alex Hermosa and he was talking about the same thing. He was like when he was first started out doing content creation, well, two things. He said that he was talking about Simon Sinek,
Mm,
and he was talking
yeah.
about how like there's the infinite game,
Oh,
right?
beautiful
And then
book,
they're
man.
like
Great book.
exactly, exact phenomenal book. And he's talking about there are many games in between along the way of the eliminate game. And he said the
Hmm.
idea in entrepreneurship, and I was saying sales too,
Hmm.
right, is to focus on how can I stay in the game, not necessarily
100%.
winning in that regard, but like what can I do to continue to play the game. So I
Man,
thought about that when you said that.
yeah, a good friend of mine is still a professional poker player, right? He's got he's
Mm-hmm.
got he's got a couple of World Series bracelets, he's got a couple of rings, and he's a really good friend of mine. He actually left child psychology to go be a full-time poker player. Really cool
Mm-hmm.
guy. And
Left child psychology to
yeah,
go with that's wow. Okay.
dude, he makes way more as a poker player than he ever did as a child
Obviously.
psychologist, right?
Obviously.
And we were talking one time just about like advice we end up giving, right? Because he's been in the space for a while, and now people are coming to him and asking questions. And his number one advice is just don't go broke. If you
Mm-hmm.
go broke, you're out of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of
Mm.
interesting topics around there, right? Like vanity
Exactly right.
metrics, right? I
Exactly
made
right.
350 dials. Cool. No one cares, man. How many conversations did you have? How many like next steps did you get, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll see people who were bragging about verbal commitments. Cool. What are you excited about? Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you got to get that deal closed, signed, paid. So don't get excited about this because verbals will fall apart, right? And if you get excited
Exactly right.
now, you don't dig in and do the effort required to get the deal all the way across the finish line, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of room to focus on the wrong aspects of being in
Mm-hmm.
sales, right? And activity, as much as I love activity driven selling and knowing your
Right.
benchmarks and your KPIs and different things like that, it's an easy way to badly manage salespeople. Like just give
Right.
them a goal, right? 100 touches a day, or 100 dials a day, or go try to set 15 meetings for me, brand new setter and stuff like that. And there's just so many ways of getting it wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
The things that I tell everybody is any one KPI is probably a vanity point. Any one data point is probably a vanity point. When you
Mm-hmm.
start thinking about the points attached to that on either
Mm-hmm.
before or after, that's where you're actually starting to define your culture. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in high ticket, right, I spent time in high ticket. I was selling for, some of these like agency biz op programs and everything.
Right, right.
And I'm like, okay, who is this for? Oh, it's for everybody. Okay, but who's it really for? Who's for everybody and stuff like that. And then I'm like, okay, well, who churns? Well, John, you don't got to worry about that. You just close them. You just
Oh,
close
yes, we
them. You
do.
just close
Yeah,
them.
we
And I'm
do.
like, you're going to pull money out of my pocket. That person's going to be calling me if this doesn't not go according to plan. And you're not
Mm.
willing to give me any kind. Well, John, you're just a salesperson. You're just supposed to get them to say yes. And
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah,
not even on the level,
yeah,
man. You're not even on
yeah.
the level. This is gonna like FTC has entered the chat, right? Like, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we're starting to see some of that catch up to some of these guys now that have been running it
And heard a
fast
lot
and
of big
loose.
names.
Oh
Exactly
yeah,
right.
absolutely, right. And so
Absolutely.
it comes down to if they don't appreciate the craft and the effort of the job, you're probably not going to find the success that you want, right? And it's so crazy because I know all these high ticket closers, right? And so many of them are, they're hopping from offer to offer. They're working three offers because no one can keep an ad account open, and they're
Right.
and they're telling themselves that they're like, well, I'm living the life that I want. Like, are you though? Like, honestly, like, I mean, there's more to it than this, but I mean, if that's where you want to hang out, then I guess but I have countless DMs with closers that they got sold on the idea, and
Mm.
the reality of it has been
It's a mismatch.
anything but. Yeah.
Do you feel that, and I think it's a great segue to kind of talk about, because I want to talk about your thoughts on coaching,
Yeah.
right? Receiving coaching, finding great coaches. But before I kind of get into that, I want to talk about like boundaries in general,
Hmm.
like um, how to set boundaries. You know, you talked about the fact that I know you talked about in one podcast. I think even in your book, we was talking about how sales is a noble profession, but not everyone perceives salespeople that way.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do you begin the process of first of all rebuilding your association of what sales means, but then number two, like, how do you start developing proper boundaries to deal with offer owners, business owners, etc. like that? Like, how do you
Mm.
foster that relationship well?
Oh my gosh, man, that's a beautiful question. One of the biggest things for me about boundaries actually comes from a really good friend of mine. His name is Jason Whitlock, and he's a guy that I've done a bunch of the same training that I have. He's a stellar individual, and he was like, your boundaries are not for other people; they're for you,
Mm,
right? So if you're trying to build a boundary that forces them into saying yes, you're probably off the mark, right?
that's
And
good.
so it's, you don't have to accept my boundaries, but these are what they are. And if you want to play the game with me, this is how we play the game, right?
I see. I
And
see. That's
if
good.
in B2B, where this sometimes gets a little chaotic, right, is they might have a buying process that doesn't map to your one call close attempted process and everything else like that. And
Right.
so
Right.
modify that a little bit to like, hey, if you have a process for this, I would love to understand it so I can be part of it and give you what you need. So that way in your other conversations, you know how to compare us to the other people you're talking to and stuff.
I like that.
But if you don't have a process, is it okay if we kind of start at the top and kind of talk about like, what were you hoping to talk about in this conversation? Because normally people who are reaching out to us are reaching out to us for A, B, and C. Is one of those top of mind for you, right? And we can see how using that kind of stuff really kind of keeps the conversation even and equal for anybody who's willing to perceive us as equal in that conversation.
Multiple paths up the mountain, man.
Absolutely.
Multiple paths up the mountain. I like that. I like that concept of like boundaries are for me and not for them because boundaries for me is that is protective, that's self-help, that's like respect and honor for myself. But if
Hmm.
I try to apply that and enforce it on someone else, it can be perceived as being controlling and overbearing
Yeah, you become a
unless
tyrant.
there's agreement. Unless there's
Absolutely.
agreement that this is how we're going to play this game, right?
100%.
Me playing a game with you, let's say baseball, basketball, etc., and I said these are the rules for this game, right? This is for both your benefit and mine, so
Yeah.
we know again what works and what doesn't work, right?
Yeah. I mean, the metaphor that I talk about with people who are new to these concepts, right, is that if we sit down at a table and there's a board and it's got black and white boxes all the way across it, right? It's a checker
Mm,
pattern and everything. You might be thinking and expecting that we're going to play checkers, but if I want to play chess, it's on me to communicate that
mm-hmm,
to you and to make sure that that is
mm-hmm.
okay. And if it's not, okay, cool. Like we're just not going to play the same game. That's all right. And then
Exactly right.
you can make a decision to play checkers if you want, or you can go
Right.
find someone who wants to play chess.
Yes. 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 Very much so. I I'm trying to get into the coaching, but I'm trying to get there. I'm working
Okay.
on it. I'm
Okay.
working on
I
it.
mean, we have time. This is your show, my friend. You steer wherever you want to go.
I'm working on it. I'm trying to get the mountain, right? So like one of the things is I've been kind of listening to you talk, 'cause I'm studying communication, obviously, right?
Hmm.
Is both kung fu, and I know you do a martial arts that you said was very. I remember one podcast like you're studying in martial arts is very ancient, and there's not a lot of like instructors or masters that teach it.
Hmm.
But I know that any kind of martial arts, kung fu, things, etc., is a very physical. So it's a kind of communication with the body. Same thing
Yeah.
with poker.
Hmm.
Poker it is a there's some mind stuff there, but
Hmm.
it's as much body as it is mind and
Oh
things like
man,
that. So
they're called
could you
tells
tell
in
me,
poker, right?
I give you a moment to kind of think about this question, but what has like poker and martial arts taught you about speaking with the body and communication?
So in poker, there's this whole concept of tells, right? And tells are
Hmm.
nonverbal communicative cues that indicate
Right.
different things, right?
Right.
And there's a really cool book. It's called Caro's Book of Tells, and it was my first book of ever like
Mm,
leading into like the psychology of unintentional behavior, right?
hmm.
And so what a lot of people will do is they'll be thinking about what they're going to say, but they're not thinking about their hands or their, the twitches or the
Hmm.
looking off to the side and all these other things that are happening, right? If you really
Right.
study all this stuff.
Hmm.
And what it really showed me was that I needed to take up space in a meaningful manner, right? And I needed to
Mm.
be okay, right? Like when I started to play
Take up
poker,
space in a meaningful manner.
yeah, like,
Mm.
in a conversation with two people, you're both taking up some space. Okay.
Right.
And what a lot of people will do is if you're not aware of your patterns, if you're not aware of your personality, if you're not aware of how you deal with things like conflict or challenge or different things like that,
Hmm. Hmm.
you're probably taking up way too much space, in which case they're not going to feel
Wow.
heard, they're not going to feel listened to, or you're not taking up any space at all. And then they feel like, well, they have to be directing you, and then it feels like an audition. Sales call should not feel
Hmm.
like an audition. If that
Mm.
if that's how it feels, you need some coaching and some training, right?
Are you talking about audition mutually or like on one end or the other or?
So that's a good question. It should be a mutually beneficial conversation, right? Is
Uh-huh.
there room for us to both benefit from this, right? Not I got
So you're saying
something
it should
for
feel like an
you.
audition for either one?
Well, what happens is a lot of people they show up and the my coach called it show up and throw up, right? How much does it cost? Well, it's about this kind of range. Okay, who do you guys work with? It's about this kind of thing, and there's
Yeah.
never there's never that starting with intention. That's starting with we need to do this in a way that benefits both of us, so that way we can have
I
clarity
see.
in this conversation, right?
Mm.
And the thinking behind that actually comes from this thing in kung fu, and it's called energy, right? Or chi, if you want to put it into the
Right,
kind of
right.
more old school label for it. But it's
Mm.
like, what is your intention? Where are you going? And stuff like this. And so if you don't know where you're going, it's going to be really hard to broadcast to anyone else who's in that conversation with you where you're trying to go.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
this is where you need to have a plan and a process and a repeatable framework for how you navigate your conversations, or else you're going to be here sometimes, you're going to be here sometimes, you're going to be here some, and you don't ever really know why, right? And
Hmm.
then it just feels like, well, John, everyone is just like wasting my time and making me do all these things. Okay, cool. Did you show up and take up meaningful space?
Hmm.
Or did you just show up and you just try to give them what they wanted so that way they could make a decision and leave you off in the dark? Because that's what happens a lot of times, right?
When
So
you
this,
when you say taking a meaningful space, I want to kind of go back to that. Are you
sure,
talking about? I'm assuming there are multiple meanings to that idea, but I'm assuming you're not just talking about like physical, geographical space. I'm
correct,
assuming
yeah,
you're talking about like space and energy. Yes.
exactly, yeah, right. Like
Okay.
the the one of the hardest parts is that if you're new to sales, right, especially this
Mm,
kind of selling, right,
right.
you have to know that you're enough to lead that call and to lead that conversation,
Mm,
right? And a lot of people, because of the sales stigma and they don't want to do it at all and different things like that, they don't want to show up and be like, hey, Pierre, I'm super excited to talk with you today. I have 30 minutes and is 30 minutes still okay? Okay, great.
mm-hmm,
Appreciate it. Here's what I would like to cover today. First of all, there's not going to be a big ask at the end of this thing. This is an opportunity for me to learn about where you are and what your goals are, see if there's any kind of opportunity for us to help. Sometimes there's not, and that's okay. If you start to
mm,
realize that this is not something for you, do you mind just raising your hand and letting me know? Thank you very
mm,
much. I appreciate that. I might be able to see it before you do. Might realize that it's too early or too late or, just not really aligned. If I see it
mm-hmm,
first, it's okay if I bring it up, right?
mm-hmm.
It's one of those things to where some people have too much ego to want to create it or they think that they don't have to do it. But if you don't show up that way, you're not taking up meaningful space.
I really like that. I really like that. So, you're talking about Book of Tales, all right?
Yeah,
Introduction into that. What other things have you learned? I just call it body talk for the sake of this conversation.
sure. Yeah.
What else have you learned about body talk working in poker and in martial arts?
Oh man. Well, the cool thing about martial arts is that if you're doing it well, and this is not tied to kung fu specifically, this is tied to like
Right, right,
any
right.
good martial art and a longer
Yes.
path and time and attention into it is you get really comfortable with your own body, right? Your body
Mm,
awareness and knowing where you are in space and where is your weight? Is it forward? Is it back? Is it too far back and
mm-hmm,
stuff like that. And so that helps me understanding, kind of thinking about, okay, how much space do I need to take up in this thing? Do I need to be forward leaning? Do I need to be back? Do I need to be, somewhere in between those things? Um, and so, first of all, you need to be aware of who you are. First things
mm-hmm,
first, right? And then the second level past that is you need to accept who you are, right? Because
mm,
whenever I first did a personality assessment with my coach, I kind of went on this mission to kind of go off and kill part of my personality, right? Because I was like, I'm here to be a
mm,
sales machine.
mm.
And so I was like, okay, I'm going to kill this side and I'm going to move all these things over here, right? Because I'd done hard things in the past. And it took me, I don't know, probably 3 years to realize that like my greatness was already there. I just needed to stop trying to be something else for other people and just lean into the
Everyone has an
greatness.
unfair advantage.
Absolutely, right? And so the acceptance is first. I'm sorry, awareness is first. Acceptance comes later, right? And then
Mm,
after that, you show up differently in your calls, right? Your agreements are much more built around who you actually are, right? Because I'll do a
mm-hmm,
thing with people to where I'm like, hey, on this first conversation, is it okay if we don't talk too much about like numbers, like close rate and percentages and stuff like that? Because sometimes we start diving into that, Pierre. I become a little bit of like a calculator and a robot, and I'm not trying to do that here. So is it okay if we just
mm,
keep this high level? It's still an agreement and it's still
mm-hmm,
seeking their buy-in, right? But
mm-hmm.
it's more in tune with who I actually am and the space that I take up. And also knowing that, like, I kind of don't believe it whenever people are like, John, I closed deals. And I'm like, cool, tell me about the last one. And they're like, it's been a while. And so, like, let's just have a regular conversation. Don't try to flex for me. I'm not trying to flex for you. Let's just chat.
I remember I was going through Sandler's training one time, and they were talking about the budgeting stuff and how to talk about money.
Hmm.
And they said the way that they had talked about, say, they preface it by saying, if you have problems talking about money, right?
It's your
Being
own
open
concept.
enough to kind of talk about that. Hey, before we kind of, it's great to meet you. Before we kind of dive in, do you mind if I share something with you first? And like, sure. You know, what I would like to do at the beginning of this call, I know it's uncommon, but I would like to kind of go ahead and get the money out of the way first because, for me, talking about money has always been like a weird subject and it makes it weird for other people. So I like to
Hmm.
get those things out of the way first so we can have a productive conversation to figure out what you need. Would you be open to talking about that first? Some variation of that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I remember when I first came across it, I remember my initial reaction was like, oh, who does that? But then I realized like, every person on every call is different, right? And being able to again define the game in winnable terms for you, being able
Hmm.
to find your own unique path up the mountain with some help, of course. I think this is what coaching kind of comes and help you figure those things out.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this real quick. First of all, is there anything else you want to add about in body talk? I know you talked about like awareness and then acceptance,
Yeah.
right? Is there anything else you want to talk about on that first?
Uh, I mean, the awareness acceptance thing is really huge, right? The other
Hmm.
thing is, and this is a weird thing, right? Because, process is helpful until it becomes limiting, okay?
Hmm.
And so there's things that sometimes just don't make any sense, of let me send a proposal, even though we've not really talked about any kind of gaps or pains or challenges that have impact to the organization,
Hmm.
right? If there's no impact, what are we talking about here? You know? And so there's little things like that. But I love what you said because the point of all of that stuff is to make them as comfortable as possible, right? And so when we can
Hmm.
broadcast humanity, right? Because money is an
Hmm.
uncomfortable topic for most people, and in
Right.
B2C it's even more uncomfortable because they're not thinking about money, right?
Right.
Inside of B2B, people have budgets, people are thinking about it, they've got money set aside for these things, but
Right.
budgeting in and of itself is a label and a word that forces the mind into
Triggers,
certain
man.
things, right? So like if you're on a like a high ticket B2C pipeline and you're like, what's your budget for this? They don't have one, right? And
They
you
don't
ask
have one.
badly, right? You
They
set
don't have
yourself up
one.
for, well, I don't have a budget for this. And then they're like, well, come on, bro, do you want to improve? It's a bad way to frame the question, right? And so that's where you have to gotta get deep enough.
Knowing your audience on that one, right?
Exactly right. Got to know the audience, got to know who you're talking to, and you got to be able to put this into buckets and packages that make sense for them.
Right.
Otherwise, you're dragging them through like a weird like translation process, right?
Hmm.
So if
I
they're talking
agree.
about ARR, annual recurring revenue, move
Mm-hmm.
your stuff to ARR. Don't put it into a
Hmm.
monthly return or an MRR package because then they're having to
Hmm.
do mental math and they're not going to be as present in the conversation, right?
Making it more difficult.
Absolutely, right? So meet them where they are and understand where that is because it's going to be different for every pipeline that you sell on, right? And so big fan of having a
This is a
listening tool,
reminder.
going and like talking to people about like going and talking to the end customer, right? What was this? How was it helpful? What'd you get
Right.
from it? Different things like that. How were you thinking about this before you worked with us? How do you think about it now that you have worked with us?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so if they're not willing to let you talk to customers, there's probably some problems, right? Because there should be
Hmm.
someone who's been happy with the process or with the growth or with the thing that they bought that you can go sit with and have some cool conversations so that way you can start with more poise and be ready to kind of navigate the conversation on their terms because they're the one buying, right? Like we
Yeah.
don't have to write a check at the end of this thing, right? They do.
Yes.
So we need to make sure that they feel really, really, really comfortable being open and honest with us.
Mm. And that's good. I find it scary how much alike we are. Like, why haven't we talked before? Like, it's kind of scary. Like look like a light-skinned twin, with no hair. So like, what hair?
That got me, dude. That got me. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see.
I'm gonna change my LinkedIn headline to Pierre's light-skinned brother, right? And to see how it goes over there.
Sure, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be so great. Let's see. I remember a quote because we're still talking about multiple paths of the mountain uniqueness in selling,
Mhm.
bringing yourself to this call within an established framework or process.
Yeah,
Um, I remember a friend of mine named Joey. One time I was on a program of his, and he said the most neglected study in the world is a study of yourself.
agreed.
Right? So I want to ask you, like, for you, like, I don't think very many people talk about that concept. I think it's presented in various styles and ways over time, but I don't think it's like a real, like anyone like sitting down making that, having that conversation. So
Hmm.
like, you seem to have done lots and lots of like personal work, understanding yourself, personality assessments,
Yeah.
understanding how you learn, more specific. I've heard you mention that a few times. So like what are some of the things that you have personally done and things that you may want to pass on or advocate for other people to do to kind of understand themselves better so they can bring more humanity to their sales and selling?
I mean, that's a beautiful question. I'm trying to frame this in the right way so that way it makes sense.
Sure.
I wasn't opposed to bringing my whole self to these sales roles that I had before I was really on the level. I just didn't think I should have to, right? And so should is a very dangerous word. Okay.
On the level, what do you mean by like on the level? Before you go on the level, what
Like,
does it mean?
um, have you been through it? Right? If you've not been through
Mm.
it, you can't understand what it's going to be like. You just categorically, okay? And then
Like on the level, like in terms of being confident in sales, you mean?
owning the pressure, owning the stress of being in sales, owning the
Okay.
dissonance from like leadership and the moving of the goal lines and the changing of things and
Okay.
choosing to shut all that out and just focus on, am I generating pipeline? Am I qualifying my opportunities well? Am I staying in touch with them and connected to them until they're actually across the
Mm.
finish line? Because there's
Mm.
there's a million other things, right? There's meetings and there's, well, we have a new comp plan and hey, we're running new ads and we want to go do this thing, we want to charge more, right? There's all these things that can get in the way, right? And some of them should. Some of them should make everyone pause and be like, hold on a second, okay? But sales is a performance driven role, okay? And if you don't care about your performance, you're not going to make it, period,
Exactly.
okay?
Exactly.
And so if you've never been let go from a sales role, you're probably thinking that everyone is just going to give you what you need and they should and they should and that's where should becomes a very bad word, okay?
Right.
So for me, for myself, right, I had this moment. I've always been a nerdy reader, right? But most of my
Yeah.
stuff was science fiction and fantasy, right? Like these were the
Hmm.
lanes that I read in a lot. And then whenever my business partner, the guy who said sales is like kung fu, he was like, "Well, man, like, you can get into a flow state." And I never heard of a flow state before. And I was like, "What is that?" And he's like,
That's another one of those words.
yeah, he goes, you don't know what a flow state is? And I was like, well, no. And he was like, it's kind of like being in the pocket. And I was like, okay, I'm familiar with being in the pocket. And he gave me this book, and it was called The Rise of Superman, and it's by this guy
Mm-hmm.
by Kotler, right? And it was all
Stephen
about
Collar.
how
Yep.
how how extreme sports have a rapid evolutionary loop because of the death component, right? And it talked about how a little bit of challenge will put you into a flow state if you have these other environments. And I was
Mm-hmm.
having that at poker, right? Like I would go play poker for like 18 hours in a row and not even be tired because of the flow state. I would be able to
Wow.
go spar and practice with my kung fu buddies and get tooled up and get smacked around and everything and be like, let's do more because I was in a flow state, right? And so
I can totally see that.
he gave me that book and I read that and man, I couldn't put it down, right? Like I was a skateboarder as a kid, so like I remember Danny Wade jumping over the wall and hearing about it and everything. And so hearing that he had a shattered ankle while doing it and the only reason he was able to do it
Mm.
was because of the flow state and the detachment of some of these other things,
Wow.
I was like, oh, this is it. And then I just started buying every single book I thought that would help me. And then I started asking other people, like in my sales training class, what are you reading? What's been helpful for you? So big part of it was reading a lot and then getting into audiobooks was a big huge thing for me because I was driving around a lot
Mm.
and so having that
Right.
kind of
Right.
my coach called it dashboard university playing in the background was super
That's
helpful.
cool. Mm-hmm.
But man, on the side of that, I worked with a Sandler coach for a very long time, right? And I was the
Mm-hmm.
guy that was bringing that same sort of like kung fu, I'm going to do the hard stuff to that class, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
periodically he'd break out the video camera and he'd put it over his shoulder, right? And so you'd have
Mm-hmm.
to role play with him while looking into the camera lens the entire time. And it was always odd, Pierre. On those weeks, everyone
Right.
else was like, you know what? I'm a little behind this week, guys. I'm going to skip class. You're behind every
Right.
week. And
Every week, bro.
every week, bro.
Every week, bro.
But this is the week you're not going to show up. Why? Because it was too uncomfortable, right? It was
Of
too
course.
hard to look into it. And then I had this epiphany. There's always mirrors in a martial arts school. There's always mirrors in a gym, right? And people love
Mm-hmm.
to look in those mirrors when they're doing the things that they're like great at, right? But they're
Mm-hmm.
scared to look into those mirrors whenever they're doing something new or different things like that. And
Hmm.
so that concept of like, okay, I'm willing to do the hard things. Like, let me go find the hardest things possible because if I do those hard things, that should help me get better faster. And that came
Mm-hmm.
from being willing to play, 1,500 hands to like try to only play the premium hands and fold everything else, right? To like
Mm-hmm.
challenge some of my behaviors and patterns and trying to do 100 punches to get one that's really really solid, right? And then being willing to
Mm-hmm.
do 100 more to try to get two solid. So when I brought all that energy over here to like this lane, man, get out of the way, right? So like I was going to like annual summits, I'm buying courses for myself, right? But it comes down to you have to take charge of your own development. Otherwise, you're waiting for other people to develop you, and that might miss the mark, right? Because some people can only coach and lead in the way that they want to be coached and led. And if you don't align with that on a personality and learning basis, it's probably going to lead to more friction and frustration and anxiety than success in the seat.
So that's good. So I like so you have there are a few things that you brought up for sure. Um, I think the biggest issue so far with learning self is there's not enough information. All right, you don't have enough information in the front end to make a judgment call like what you should be looking into,
Oh yeah.
which is where the
Mm-hmm.
reading and exposure comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Like your friend, the coach, and the guy who talked about your, I think it's just like exposure as part of that. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other part is like, you talked about like once you have the information, then going on seeking the best information there. So like you're going from there's a lot of information to now I want to focus on quality information, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now, like dealing with like more personal information, like doing the work of understanding how you think, how you learn, those kinds of things. I know you mentioned personality before. I know you talked about DISC in other podcasts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that a personality test that you did, or
Oh
have
yeah.
you done quite a few?
Still
Or
still use it, right? Like it completely broke my head, right? Because my coach,
mm,
like, man, it's a weird moment in time for when you go around and you see people who were just motivated and they're that put me in, coach, it's going to be fine, put me in, coach, it's going to be fine. Like I have concern, right? Like,
mm,
I'm a reasonable human being, and
right,
I was thinking that because I had those concerns I was broken, right?
mm,
And so the fact that I had any doubt, the fact that I would ask these questions, right, it would get me labeled
mm-hmm,
as a problem child on some of the teams that I was on.
right,
But then I
right,
would see these other people that weren't capable of asking themselves those kinds of questions of like, hey, are these the right activities? Am I doing the right things? Is this the right person for me to be talking to? It was just watch this, hold my beer kind of thing.
mm-hmm,
And the like that was just making me think that like I was never going to find any success. And so my coach,
right,
when we did disc together, right? I still have that first copy of that first assessment I ever took. And he's like, "Man, you want to know why it's so hard?" And I was like, "I'm
mm-hmm,
dying to know why it's so hard." And he goes, "You
right,
just want to be taught, and most people don't have anything to teach." And so then he was like,
mm,
maybe sales isn't it for you. Maybe you go back to school, you become a CPA, you become a developer, because these would be more in line with your
something in that
personality.
field, that area. Mm-hmm,
But through the kung fu thing, I'd gone through the experience of being shown a thing that helped me. And then there was a big thing in our school, you have to teach it as soon as you can do it. Because if you do it for too long without having to teach it, you forget how to teach it. Okay.
mm,
And so, you would learn something and it would be a humbling experience because then you'd have to go teach it to someone else. And sometimes they just need a different talk track, a different way, and things like that. And so I got really good at
another angle. Mm-hmm,
exactly, right? I would get really good at, okay, this person isn't resonating with my way of teaching this thing. And I would grab, one of the other assistant instructors, or I'd grab my teacher. And I can remember
mm-hmm,
this one time I was bludgeoning this brand new student
mm-hmm.
on this one technique. And I can't get this person to get it. And I'm starting to get mad. I'm starting to get frustrated and
Yeah,
everything, right? And
yeah,
it's about to be
yeah.
like, how do you not get this, right? Well, they're supposed to be getting it from me, so it's my fault. And
Mm,
I remember calling my teacher over, my Sifu, and I said, "Hey, sir, like I'm struggling with this. Like I don't know how to communicate this in a way so that way he can do it." And my teacher was like, "Well, okay, let me see." So he watches one, and I throw the punch, and he does the action, and then he's like, "Okay," and he's like, "Okay, have you seen this other technique?" And the guy was like, "Oh yeah, does it perfectly," and he goes, "Okay, do that, but then like curl your fingers." And then it just worked. And then he walks off. And Pierre, that first time I was pissed. I was mad. I was like,
Why
"What?"
didn't I think of that?
Yeah. And then I was like, "Wait a minute. This is not about me needing to be right. This is about me getting the point across." Right?
Hmm.
So over time, anytime I hit that wall of, okay, they're not getting it my way, I'll try someone else's way, I'll try someone else's way. And if none of those would work, I just go grab someone else. How do you explain this? Can you help me
Hmm.
for a moment? And so
Hmm.
I'd had a lot of those experiences of being a good teacher, being able to communicate. and then still not being able to make that connection. And so I realized that I can't be the only person who's a C personality who's found success
Right.
in sales. I just
Right.
need to go find C's.
Other people who've done it.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Right. And listen to
That's
them.
really good.
And it just came from, having to teach people and sitting with that thing of like, man, they're just not getting it. They're just not getting it. And then realizing that it's my job to figure out the way to put it into a package so they can get it, as opposed to being pissed off that
Right.
they're not getting it in the way that I want to talk about it. So
Yeah.
that's what changed everything for me. But we still do disc on all of our hiring. We do disc on every first step for anyone who comes through my program. We do disc because how you show up in your conversations and the things that put emotional pressure on you are going to be different,
Yeah.
right? And if you
Yeah.
don't know that stuff, you're blind, right? And then
Hmm.
someone is like, "Well, we can't meet today," and you're like, "Man, you're just wasting my time, man." People are sometimes busy, dude. Like, calm down, be a regular
Hmm.
human being. But let's acknowledge, why did that set you off? Let's talk about it. Let's
Hmm.
look at that. Why'd you get so offended, right? Are people not allowed to
Hmm.
be busy? People are allowed to be busy. You're just wasting my time. Okay, let's talk
Yeah.
about it. Let's go
Yeah.
figure that stuff
Yeah.
out. I've also done things like therapy, right? I did some therapy and it was incredibly
Mm.
helpful. But one of the most easy things to do is to journal, right? Now,
Hmm.
a lot of people don't like journaling,
Yep.
right? And I was stuck on it for a while. I told my coach for the first 3 years that I was like, I'm not journaling. I'm not doing that. And then I started to do it, but I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I was doing it to look cool in front of others, and then eventually found a way, and it was helping me when I was doing it that way, but then it stopped helping me. There was a limit on it because it wasn't for me. It was for cool. It was for looking cool because everyone on all the entrepreneurial podcasts I was listening to were talking about journaling. And I was like, okay, well,
Mm.
now I'll start journaling because Tim Ferriss is talking about it.
Hmm.
And it
Shout out
was
Tim
helpful.
Ferriss.
Shout out Tim Ferriss, right? He's probably watching this, right? He's going to call in here in
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah. He's
Uh,
definitely watching this. Yeah.
so so then I started to do it, and it helped, and then it stopped helping because I was doing it for the wrong intention, right?
Hmm.
And then I refound it during the pandemic, and that's when everything changed for me once again. But if you're not aware of how you talk to yourself about your actions and about your outcomes and about how you spend your time, you're probably lying to yourself or beating yourself up to a level of degree that isn't helpful and shutting yourself down. So, journaling
Hmm.
is the fastest way. If you don't want to hire a coach, if you don't want to go through a program, if you don't want to go do anything else like this, start writing about how you spent your time and what you did that day, because
Right.
it's going to take a while, right? But when you can start to see, like, you're wiring yourself into these corners, you're painting yourself into these corners that you can't get out of, maybe there's room to talk about ourselves differently, right? And that's
Hmm.
where the inner work, I think, really starts to begin. Meditation is incredibly helpful, but it's kind of a different skill set. But the first thing is, like, you need someone you can be open and honest with, who can be open and honest with you of like, man, maybe you're overshooting the mark a little bit. And
Yeah.
accountability partners can be really great for this, but ultimately the easiest thing, grab a pad, grab a journal. I always have a journal on me, with me. Like, every other Friday, I still meet with an accountability buddy. And one of our kind of deals is that if I don't have a journal with me, I got to buy all the beer, right? Like,
Great. Great. Great.
so
Great.
it's always there. And I'm always looking at, okay, how am I holding this? How am I thinking about it? And it's a
Yeah.
game changer. So reflection is a big part of the inner work.
Right. And that's it. And I kind of double down on at least one of the things for sure is like accountability partners.
Oh, man,
A lot of
game changer.
people, game changer. And the thing is, it's like even if you another concept you can find it anywhere, but there are like I didn't even notice until like maybe like a year ago. Like you can actually pay people to be your accountability person. Like that's like old
Hmm.
sites and stuff dedicated as I did when I'd be on sales calls and I'd be on offers that didn't have a very, very strong like accountability piece to it. I
Hmm.
would like recommend it's like, hey, this might be a little thing that you might want to add on to your journey to kind of help you along the way.
Yep, absolutely.
And they kind of double back on something else you said, which is um, like matching the teaching style, the learning style of the person with going to coach. Finally got there, thank God. Finally got to the coach right. Thank God. It's like one of the things I would ask on sales calls would be um, I wouldn't ask on every call, but just when it like felt right, which is like when you go through his content, whoever the influence person, like, do you resonate with him? Like, does when you listen to him talk, that did it make sense to you? Like, did
Hmm.
you get a lot of value? And when they give me like that emphatic yes, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be fine. This person's gonna be fine.
Yeah. Right.
Because like a really, really good check to say this is does this align not just
Hmm.
with can it make you money, but like does it align
Yeah.
with how you learn? And
$100%.
I didn't notice what I was doing, but as you said, that made all the sense in the world.
Well, okay, have you read The Inner Game of Tennis?
No, but it's on my list.
Oh my God, man. If I can be so bold, it should be next on your list, right?
You certainly may.
Cool. There's a all of my experience of working with coaches and then also being a coach. I read this book very early on because my business partner he was like, you got to read it, you got to read it, you got to read it. And I was like, dude, this is about
Hmm.
tennis, bro. I don't care about tennis, right? If there was an inner game of kung fu, I'd read it. And he was like, it's not
Yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
tennis,
The
idiot. Go
Tao
read the
Kung Fu.
book, right? And so I went and I read the book, and he's talking about how easy it is to overcoach, right? And oh
Mm,
man, I've been guilty of overcoaching many, many, many
mm,
times. And it talks about how the better feedback loop is allowing them to find it themselves. Okay.
mm-hmm.
And it reminds me whenever I was a kid and I was a nerdy reader and I'd read a word that I didn't know and I'd go ask my mom, and she'd be like, "Well, if you go look it up, you'll remember it." I
Right,
hated it,
right, right, right,
just give me
right.
the answer kind of thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But that's
But you're
ultimately
right
what it
here.
is. Yeah, exactly, right? And so going back to that whole concept of like I can tell you that your punch is bad, or I can make you look in the mirror. Okay.
Mm,
And in the Kung Fu school, there was this thing that we would always joke about, right? Because some people would get very stuck in their old patterns and their old ideas, and they would show up and they'd be
mm,
like, "Well, in my old school," and we'd always have to do, "Okay, are you still there?" No. Does it serve you to think about it that way? No, right? And so when it comes to coaching and these kinds of things, you need buy-in, right? Because it's always
mm,
easy to be like, well, you don't get it, John. It's different for me. Oh, your cell is
mm,
categorically different than every other cell on the
mm,
planet. Well, John,
mm,
this won't work for me because okay. So you're not willing to try.
mm.
You're not willing to try. Don't give me
Because
your
they
money.
can't answer the question, how do you know?
Absolutely, for sure, right? Because we're different. Okay, cool. You have created a reality that no one is going to be able to help you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe sometimes it's not that you've created that reality that no one can help you, but you can't hear me, right? And so sometimes it's just a
Mm-hmm.
mismatch in the person, and you might be coachable to someone else because
Right, right,
I've
right.
had
That's true.
managers who were probably, historically very good, just weren't good for me,
Right.
right? And that's okay. That's a thing, right? I used to blame them, but now I just realized it was a mismatch in the working style and communication style and training style. But then
Mm-hmm.
also, I've had to tell people no, right? So like,
Mm-hmm.
in my world, it becomes very easy. Well, John, I think I need some help. Okay, cool. What do you need help with? Well, I just got to overcome this one objection. Cool. Go on. Like, all right. How are you going to get back in front of him? Well, John, I don't want to get back in front of him. I just want to close the deal. I can't help you, right?
Yeah, I'm not
Sometimes
that guy.
people are looking for the wrong things, and this is where
Mm,
being able to sell as a guide really really matters because
mm,
they're going to be looking for what they're looking for. Okay,
right.
the goal is to build enough trust so that way we can show them like, hey, Pierre, a lot of people tell me when they start talking to me that they just need more leads, right? Sometimes that's true, but a lot of times that is kind of lacking ownership of what's happening in the conversation. So before we
Mm,
kind of dive into that, can we talk about your lead flow and can we talk about what this is going through? Because some
mm,
people, like when they start thinking that they need more and more and more and more and more, there's not enough data, there's not enough time, there's not enough team, there's not enough in any of these things. So while you might need more, and I'm open to that, can we dive a little deeper first, right? And if
right.
you go into that mode of like, well, John, you just don't get it. Cool, man. You've already made that decision. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna save some
I
time.
remember I remember Michael Dunleavy I had on a podcast one time and he said, what most people don't understand is that there are more reasons to say no to your offer than there is to say yes.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, it's a great line for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I love when there's room to do this. Pierre, I'm super excited to talk with you. This is not a fit for everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, it's cool that we're talking today because I was just going through some of the reasons why people tell us no and why sometimes we don't like get to where we're trying to go. Can we talk about why you shouldn't move forward with us
Mm-hmm.
first? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
talk about, huh? Like, you
Total
know,
game changer.
total game changer, right? But you got to disconnect from the outcome. You got to disconnect from the need of that close. You got to disconnect from the value of like, well, let's just leave this as a maybe so that way I can, follow up and stuff. No, let's get the clarity on this thing,
You're exactly right.
you know?
Exactly right. I
So yeah.
wanted to I wanted to go back to something that you talked about. You talked about how therapy and journaling
Mm-hmm.
have helped, and I know this plays a big role to some of the other things you talked about a bit earlier, which was being able to become aware
Mm-hmm.
and then accept. You talked about how, for a period of time you thought that your personality type, without any information and the knowledge, right? That was a problem, that you were just like the problem child in the thing.
Yeah.
So if you're open to sharing, you don't have to, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what is your biggest takeaway from therapy? Biggest aha moment in therapy versus internally?
Mm. Man, that's a great question. Uh,
And then how did working your sales process, if it did?
it was funny. I was kind of running around with the idea, well, therapy's not a bad thing. Everybody would benefit from therapy, but I probably don't need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it
Mm-hmm.
was good intentions for everyone else,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
not following through on those intentions for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so during COVID, right, my business was struggling just like every other small business on the planet was. And at the time, I was working for like a lot of high ticket drop shipping bros and different things like that. And so, like it was like the bottom dropped out, right? And we had to figure it
Mm-hmm.
out. And so I was struggling and I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna go try to do this thing, of like, okay, actually going through and talking to a therapist and getting some of the stuff off
Mm-hmm.
my chest and making sure I'm thinking about it the right way. And
Mm-hmm.
really honestly, what it showed me was like how close like a good sales conversation or a good leadership conversation is to a therapeutic conversation, right? You're supposed to be the backstop. You're not supposed to be leading them around by the nose, you know? So what do you want to talk about? I want to talk about this. Oh, why that? Well, because this is where I'm stuck. Okay, why are you stuck? Right? You can be completely in a Socratic mode of just asking questions and being that backstop and helping them box it up, right? Because one of the things that I talk about is that if you don't want to be super pushy, half of the job is like splitting it all out so that way they leave that call either knowing they need you or they categorically don't and they need something else, but helping them put that into the right box so that way they can take the right actions after this conversation is a game changer, right? You show up differently in your conversations. And this is where we go from being like product focused to being solutions focused, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can we work together to help you find a solution? Well, John, you don't get it. Okay, cool. You don't see me as someone who can help you get to this thing. I can
Mm-hmm.
make a choice to stay and fight with you and try to earn your trust, or I can put this thing down and go find someone else to talk to, right? And so therapy is a little bit different in the format of like, you're bought in because you're paying for it and stuff like that. But when I was talking with my therapist, I was like, dude, this feels just like discovery. This feels exactly like discovery, and it feels exactly like how my mentors and the people who poured into me were, asking me questions and not letting me hide, not allowing the assumption to not be drilled into, so that way we're both on the same page of it. And so that's when I was like, okay, if anything, it bolstered all of my thinking and all of my philosophies and honestly took it down a level, right? Because sometimes I'd feel like, we don't got to dive into this. We don't got to dive into this. No, we need to dive into that. Like, we need to understand, right? And so, like, when you can kind of think about, the philosophies, right, of the different things of thinking, right? If you're running an agency, let's talk about the fact that like, hey, maybe you want to build your own team and you don't want to work with an agency, right? Have you thought about that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, building a team doesn't really make sense for us. Can we talk a little bit more about that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really seeking that understanding before we jump at it thinking that we have something to sell them is really the thing that I took away from it.
Right. And if you guys are like interested in, like, I know we talk a lot about active listeners, which is essentially what he's talking about in this case, like the
Mm-hmm.
real power of active listening. In non-sales context, I would encourage anyone to go back and look at like one of the early pioneers of the subject. Like, yeah, Chris Voss is a later adapter of that idea,
Mm-hmm.
but Carl Rogers, like going through YouTube, watching his videos on active listening, like that was his thing, and just watching how he navigates, client-centered therapy, which is essentially what that is, and how he's asking questions, building off informations, even tactically interrupting in a way that is beneficial.
100%.
has was really, really helpful for me kind of watching that whole interchange going on outside of a, hey, you want to buy now kind of thing. It was a really,
Yeah.
really helpful kind of paradigm for that.
Yeah. Like
So it's like a little side note.
I don't know who that is, but I just wrote a note to go check that out. I read a book actually called High Probability Selling, right? And there was this
Hmm.
component in there, and this goes back to a thing to where anything more than the minimum is purposeful, right? So how was the
Mm-hmm.
weekend? It was fine. Versus how was the weekend? It was fine. Saturday was a little bit better. The person wants to talk about Saturday, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, in this book
Hmm.
called High Probability Selling, he's talking about doing some account management with an account, and they bring up a thing, right? And he goes into a deadpan thing. He takes all of his bias out of it. He doesn't try to load it or lead the witness at all. And he was like, "Oh, that sounds really important. Should we talk about that now?" And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
"No, we're good. Okay, cool. If you're good, I'm good." Right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. It's meeting them exactly where they are, right? Like not just being on the same page, being in the same sentence on the same word is really what it comes down
Mm-hmm.
to. And if we're thinking
Mm.
about this is where frameworks and scripts and things like this kind of, have some room to improve. But it comes
Right.
down to the idea that you should internalize that thing so that way you're not having to think about it in the middle of it, right? Like
Exactly right.
I'm always going to be asking a question. My curiosity is always in play and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I have to kind of dial that down sometimes to make sure that I'm here with you. Like, what are we talking
Exactly
about
right.
right now, and what is next? And
Exactly
maybe
right.
maybe this tangent is helpful for the conversation, and maybe it's not helpful at all. But you're bringing it up for a reason. Can we talk a little bit more about
Exactly
that?
right.
You know, and it's that stuff. Like I was seeing that stuff, but I wasn't really doing as much of it, right? Because I would
Mm.
well, let's just stay over here and stuff like that. But if they're bringing it up, let's talk about it, right? Because let's
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that I'm a salesperson and you probably have some fear of salespeople. So the fact that you
Of
brought this up
course.
at all, probably some value here. Let's dive into it, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
nothing else,
I
I at
like that
least show that
transition.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
listening. Like I'm at
Mm-hmm.
least broadcasting that I'm listening to what you want to talk about. And that
Mm-hmm.
builds a lot of trust and rapport.
Yeah, because a lot of times, people people think that everyone is in the present, but more often than not, when they come to your sales call, they're somewhere in the past.
100%, right? Or they're in the future. Like, oh
Oh, and
my
in the
gosh.
future, exactly right.
Like I work with like a lot of lead gen people, right? Because lead gen is
Mm-hmm.
ripe for uncommunicated assumptions and inappropriate expectations, right? And so everyone's mad about it, right? But we could have slowed
Yeah.
down and asked some better questions. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
if you don't dive into that, they're going to build their own expectation, right? So let's just slow it all the
Mm-hmm.
way down and make sure that we're on the same page.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So that was your. Do you remember the moment in the therapy session, the first therapy session, where you were sold on the idea of continuing?
Oh man, beautiful question. So I went through a platform called Better Help or Better Health. I forget which one it was,
Better
but
help. Mm-hmm.
they were giving a discount for anyone in the military. And so I was like, okay,
Mm.
right, with the discount, I'll take a shot at this. And the
Mm-hmm.
first person they matched me with was just not a fit, right? She got
Mm-hmm.
very latched on to my mom and just wanted to talk about my mom and everything. And I'm like, I probably got some stuff there but that's not really what I want to talk about today. And so I ended that
Mm.
call and I was like, man, that was garbage. I'm not going back to that. And then uh, and then I had a moment where I paused
Yeah.
myself and I said,
Yeah.
hey, dummy, if someone else
That's
came
so
to
great.
you and said that they tried it one
Garbage.
time on one rep and they were less than happy with it and they weren't going to do it again, what would you tell them? And I'm like, well, I would tell them that they're stupid, right? Because they're going
Mm-hmm.
to, and so was able to reason through that. And then I was like, okay, let's try to match again. And then I got matched with a really great person who was just like a good fit. And he said this line, right? And because of my lane in selling, I knew that it was a rapport thing. And he was like, "Well, man, like we can talk about anything you want." And I was like, "Okay, anything." And he was like, "Yeah, man, I talk to some people." And then he put this line in there, but that motive, sometimes when I talk with others, right, allowing me to hide in the crowd and everything else like this, there was this moment where I was like, "Oh, like here's the thing that I do and teach other people to do, and now it's being here and it's being used on me." And like trust just right, we just dropped into it and I was like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
can be open and honest with you. You know what you're talking about. You're going to meet me where I am and this is going to be about
Mm-hmm.
me and my help and not just you trying to guide me to someplace that I'm not interested in going. So
Exactly
like
right.
after that first conversation, I was like, okay, I'm in, right?
Hmm.
And so it was a great conversation. I think we talked. I think it was like every 2 weeks for probably 2 months, 2 to 3 months, and then I was like, hey man, I think I'm good for now. Like I'm not saying I'm going to be good for forever, and that I
Of
don't have
course.
anything else to work on, but like some of these big hurdles have been kind of helped, and I appreciate it and stuff like that. And so still, I sent him an email whenever we launched the book and was like, hey man, like then you're part of why this exists, so thank you very much. And
Hmm.
it was a big deal. It was a game changer.
Hmm. And that speaks to a point like, coaching, just like everything else, therapy, it's not a forever. Like I need this forever, but
Hmm.
then may be appropriate for certain seasons, certain times in your
Yeah,
journey. Which
100%.
goes back to you gotta learn. I think it's a book of Ecclesiastes was like, to everything is given a season, to every purpose under heaven kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's like you'll go through seasons and cycles of things. You have to be able to figure out, okay, what is necessary for where I'm at now, right now, to get to the
100%.
next phase of the journey. Yeah.
And
And
a note on that, if I can be so bold,
sure.
your accountability needs to change, right?
Hmm.
And really good accountability is not that friend that wants to bust your chops when you miss the goal. It's someone who cares enough about you and your plan and your path that that comes through the conversation, right? Because like
Hmm.
my accountability partner, like he knows where I'm going. He knows what my counts and my benchmarks are and where I'm trying
Hmm.
to go. And because I know that he cares so much, I don't want to let him down, right? It's not about the
Right.
fact that I'm gonna might have to buy the beers or he's gonna razz me a little bit. It's like I made a
Hmm.
commitment to someone in good faith that I was gonna do these things, right? So
Hmm.
it's not it sometimes your best friend is the worst accountability partner because they're waiting for
Right.
you to fail, because they're
Right.
waiting to needle you. And by
Exactly
that
right.
same token, if you don't know your inputs that lead to your outputs, accountability probably isn't the right thing for you yet. You probably need actual
Hmm.
coaching or training because, once again, if we're going to appreciate the process, we need to know what that process is, right? We need to know the activities, the KPIs, the metrics, the counts, how many dials, all these things to get to the
Yeah.
outputs, or else we're probably not at the level we need to be. And there's a little too
Yeah.
much hope, and there's a little too much
Right.
of just focused on the outcome and not the
Right.
process and not the day to day.
Right. I was asked totally good point. And I think that in the world, especially in sales training, sales, the high ticket sales profession, there is such an emphasis on like you need to buy more coaching, and then there's the frame of if you're not investing in yourself, then how can you tell other people invest? And I get that, but what I find more often than not is people buying sales training without any understanding of why they are buying the sales training.
Mm-hmm.
People will DM me or message me and they're like, "Hey, what do you feel like is the best sales training?" Like, it just really depends on what it is you're looking for at the time, right?
100%.
One guy I was talking to is a good friend of mine, and he and I were talking, and he was in like three different trainings at the time,
Oh,
and he was just like,
that's bad news.
"Yeah," and I said, "Okay." I said, "Do you know?" I said, "What are you trying to get?" He's like, "I'm a bit confused and I don't know what to do." And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "Do you know why you're in this person versus that? Like, do you have like an outcome, what you're trying to get out of that?" And it was like a light bulb in his mind. He's like, "Oh." Like it was all like he was saying, am I supposed to have that? Like, yeah, yeah, you probably
Yeah,
do. But it was a mistake I had made before. So it was easy to
same.
catch because it's something I had made before.
Yeah.
So like that was the big aha takeaway for therapy.
Hmm.
What about journaling? I know you talked about stoicism and things like
Yeah.
that, but what was the
The
big street drop
the
for you there?
the coolest thing for me, and this is how I talk about it now, is that and I saw this, I think, on a LinkedIn post back in the day when LinkedIn was still like worth spending time on, right? It's become a little bit of a cesspool here recently, but we'll talk about that another time. Um, I saw this guy, and he said a Mac and a PC are the same machinery, right? They have the same
Hmm.
component parts, they've got the same things holding it together. What
Hmm.
differentiates them is the code that they run on, right?
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
really jarred
Yeah,
me,
that's good. That's
right?
good.
Because it is the same, right? Like
Hmm.
I work on a Mac, I game on a PC. They're both right here in the room, and they're categorically different, right? Some of the systems I
Hmm.
use in my business on my Mac don't work on my PC. The only
Right.
difference is the code base, right? And
Hmm.
we're running on code, we're running on patterns, we're running on tapes, we're running on, our biases, we're running on all of these things, and
Yes.
we're also running on our
Yes.
personality. And so
Yes.
if you're not aware of how you're coded, you're probably too negative or too positive, and you're overshooting the mark one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. 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 Was that the aha takeaway from the
I
journaling?
mean,
Was
yeah,
that the
because
big?
like I'd been doing it enough to where I had seen that like some of the things that I was writing of like, well,
Mm-hmm.
this always happens to me. It doesn't always happen to me, right?
Mm.
Right? I lost this deal, man. Screw those people. This always happens to me. I'm so unlucky, right? And then look,
Curse
that's not
them.
true. That's not true, right? Look at all the deals that I have won. Look at all the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities I have closed and stuff like that. And so, but like when you do that, you're painting yourself into a corner, right? Of being a
Mm-hmm.
victim, right?
Right.
And probably not owning as much as you should, because when it's someone else's problem, we don't have to take any action to improve ourselves.
I remember listening to my coach Jack. Um, One of the biggest kind of takeaways I got from him was his exposure to like other performers in other sectors.
Yeah.
So like Michael Jordan and particularly Michael Phelps.
Oh yeah,
Um,
dude. He knows
Watching,
exactly how many strokes for
yeah,
for for
exactly.
every one of those different races, right? And that's all he's focused on, right? Not am I beating the other person, not what did I
Yeah,
eat today? It's 12 strokes to the wall, 12 strokes back, 12 strokes to
I
the wall.
was I was kind of shocked honestly because him and his coach were talking and they were walking through like his visualization process specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the one I was familiar with, like what happens there, everything goes great, wonderful, amazing. But then he was like, what you do if it doesn't work out the way you thought. And I was like, I don't think I've ever heard anyone ever do that. Like you're pacing your behavior, whether you're doing good, bad, normal, etc. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, how many people talk about that? And so he already had like a default response for regardless of how it went. And it's like his
Yeah.
brain would just automatically kick into action, whatever the outcome was.
Yep.
And I was like, that was really, really, I had never thought about that, but it really, really speaks to this idea of like being able to kind of like self code, being
Mm-hmm.
able to augment the code to kind of fit into whatever situation scenario that you're in. And
Yeah.
that takes a lot of awareness. Like, hey, are you sitting down, taking the time to talk to someone or having time with your own thoughts or working with a close friend or family member who knows you well and
Mm-hmm.
kind of speaks to your thing. It's a scary thing to be open to. It's a scary thing to be open to feedback and
Yeah.
criticism. But you really, really hit the nail on the head of like, regardless of how your personality works, the underpinning of intention of I'm here to help will
Yeah.
always be like running through the techniques and the strategies that they use, whether they're more like a Grant Cardone, it's kind of like hard charging kind of person in terms of
Mm-hmm.
help, or they're more like a Chris Doe or Chris Voss, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the underpinning of I'm here to help, I want to try to help you get where you need to be, I want you to win kind of thing will
Yeah.
always be like the underpinning of it all, man. That is powerful stuff, bro.
Absolutely. Right. Like the thing that I talk about with everything, and the reason why the mountains are in the background for another version is like,
Hmm.
if you tell someone like, "Hey, I'm willing to take you up the mountain, but I need you to carry your own oxygen." Well, you don't get it,
Mm.
right? I'm incredible. Yeah, but you could still die. So I need you to carry this oxygen,
You could
right?
die.
Are you willing to carry this oxygen? Absolutely not. You don't get it. Okay, cool, man. Like I wish you the best. I'm not your
I'm not
dad.
gonna be there.
Yeah, yeah. You're not dying on me. I can't have
Yeah, I'm
that.
not gonna there.
You know.
Oh, that's so great. I know we've talked quite a bit of time, and honestly, I wish we can talk even more to be fair. Um, but is there anything else that you would like to convey, something that you feel like that people miss out on a lot when they come
Mm.
and talk to you, or things that you've seen in the space that you wish people knew?
Whew. Man, that's a beautiful question. We're talking about for like high ticket? We're talking for salespeople specifically? We're talking like, can I have a little bit more?
I would say like, given the conversations you have quite often,
Mhm.
like what is the most repeated advice you have to give someone when they
Oh,
come to you?
okay. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Sales is a game of variables. Okay.
Hmm.
And so I have seen people, like my old sales coach always had a problem bringing on people to like work for him and sell for him and stuff like that because he was big on the idea that you needed to be able to sell if you're going to be able to coach or train. And there was always people that wanted to like teach and coach, but
Mm,
didn't want to do any sales.
mm,
And he always struggled with it and finding someone to come on and do that for him. And he brought a guy on that had had outstanding success, right, as a solar rep, right, had worked his way up. And my coach didn't believe him. He's like, "Bring me your W-2, man. I don't believe you," right? So the guy brings him the W-2, and he was so excited, but it was the wrong fit. Okay,
mm,
and he had prior success, came in here, it didn't work, right? And then fast forward a little bit, he one of the guys in the class was like, man, I want to try to do this, I want to sell for you and everything. And he promoted him or brought him on, right? And it still didn't work.
mm,
And so then that guy ended up, like, I still talk to him occasionally. He is now a real estate wholesaler, right? And for
mm,
him, it's the right lane, right? And one time I was talking to him about it, and I was like, dude, like, I'm just glad you're thriving, dude. Like what changed? And he was like, man, I feel like I have room to try. I don't really feel like there's like stakes, and there's a big thing of that, right? So you got to have the right environment for yourself, right? I'm never going to be super great for like that super salesy, we're going to war kind of thing. Nah, can't do it. Right. But I also think that you need to have trust in your leadership. You got to have
mm,
trust in the path and the comms that it's going to help get you to where you want to go, that it meets basic expectations, it allows you to live the life that you want to do. And then you got to care about either the product or the people that that product is helping. And if you don't have those three things, trust in leadership, trust in the pay, care in the product or the segment, you're probably trying to bolster yourself with all that fake it till you make it Grant Cardone stuff. If you can sell anything and you can do these things, and like maybe most people that have told me that can't sell anything, right? Like they've had one lane of success, and but they've had as much struggle as they've had success. And like I'm no
mm,
different, right?
mm,
Like canvassing for like roofing, I would never, ever, ever in a million years want to go do that job. Doesn't align with who I am, doesn't align with how I want to get the job done. Okay.
mm,
Um, and I wouldn't even try to talk myself into the fact that like that is a great use of my time. Going back and being like a high ticket person under like someone who's too marketing focused and they think that salespeople are just there to brute force them into the yes is going to be a nightmare because I care about the outcomes, I care about the people. And so if I can't have that around me, I become the cancer, right? I'm looking over my shoulder the whole time and everything, which means I'm not focused on what I need to be focused on. So
mm,
if you're struggling in a role, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not made for sales, right? Like,
mm,
oh, I struggled with that for the first 10 years of being in sales roles of, well, this just isn't it, or I would have these questions, and so therefore, like maybe I shouldn't be doing it.
mm.
In the right situation, it's the coolest job on the planet because you're just there to
Right.
improve yourself. You're just there to be a little bit better
Mm-hmm.
every freaking day, right?
Yep.
And when you can have the space to be like, okay, what can I do to try to improve myself, my performance, my goals, my conversion, whatever that is, my ability to
Mm,
connect, you can do some really cool things, right? When I
mm.
first started to shift into like this of selling via Zoom, my coach would have this line of he would say, well, when you're on the phone you can be anybody you want, right? So just be someone with confidence, right? And I was like, okay, and then the concept of like the
Just
eyes
go
of
ahead and
the
do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. But I also knew that having the in-person conversations and the networking and everything, the connection is
Mm,
deeper, right? And the eyes are the windows to the soul and all these things. And so
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
decided I'm gonna learn how to sell via Zoom and I'm gonna do this whole thing the right way. And this is before the
mm.
pandemic, right? This is back in 18
Right.
when I started this thing.
Right.
And trying to find the best way to improve, I actually bought a thing called a Pavlok, right? Pavlok is a bracelet that you can wear for habit creation. Okay. And so I met the
I
founder,
gotcha.
you know,
I gotcha.
and I was like, I have this idea. And so we actually worked together to build a facial tracking recognition. We found some freeware, some shareware on the internet, and we hooked that to the thing. So that way I could see, doesn't matter if John uses his hands and raises his eyebrows and changes his voice patterns and all these things, because as my default, I don't have a single problem running an entire conversation in this kind of flat, deadpan manner, but then people fall asleep and they're bored and everything. And so this thing would zap me on my calls if I was in, resting asshole face, if you will, right? So if I was here and my right, especially as a guy who wears glasses, right? Like depending
Mm.
upon my glasses, like my eyebrows will be
Yeah.
like right in line with the glasses. Well, like eyebrows are
Mm.
a huge expressive kind of part of the face and everything.
Exactly right.
And by tracking this and tracking it with it and trying to push more, right, it led to better connection, it led to better
Yep.
conversation and stuff. And so
Yep. Yep.
I share that story with people and they're like, whoa, man, like that is wild. That's what that's what I was working on, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you might not like it and you might not need it, but I tried it as an experiment and proved that it was helpful. And so then I kept diving more and doing these little things. And so finding ways to challenge your assumptions, finding ways to
Mm-hmm.
practice those things in a meaningful way, so that way you're not just running on autopilot. Like, man, like, but you got to have psychological safety. You got to know that your people are like the people around you are going to take care of you, that they're helping you, then and all these things, and you got to believe that the product is super solid because, dude, I've sold some high ticket things that were complete air, and I didn't know until I closed them, and that's uncomfortable. So you
Mm-hmm.
got to have the right setting around you to really be settled and rooted, right? So that way you can do the work of the journaling, of the reflecting, of looking at your actions and owning them and being an accountable person to yourself, right? And what you said you were going to go do. So it's if you're struggling, it's probably less to do with your actual abilities to succeed in a sales role and much more about the environment around you.
That's awesome, man. That is
Thank
awesome,
you.
man. Well, listen, man, I've had a phenomenal time talking with you. Um, I wanna give you an
Can I do a thing real quick? Is
sure,
it okay? All right. If
sure.
anybody who is watching this, okay, if you're new to sales, if you're thinking about it, if you're struggling, DM me, right? I don't know where you're gonna put this,
Mm-hmm.
Pierre, but if you DM me
Yes.
and I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn, DM me, I will PDF a copy of my book to you for absolutely free.
Awesome,
Just
man.
take me up on the offer, send me a DM, and tell me that you saw me on Pierre's show, and I will send you the PDF for absolutely free. Read it, take action on it. You will improve. Absolutely.
Bar none. Bar none. I think I've had, like I said, I've had a phenomenal time talking. I was just going to ask you, like, is there anything that you want to bring more attention to? Anything you feel like that? I know, I think you were working on, I think you were working on, you had like a sales lab at one point, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Were you
So
actually, you're coaching
yeah,
there?
the thing that I found was that I have found a way to kind of break down the big, huge sales conversation into practicable into chunks that we can practice, right? And so Sales Practice Lab is my attempt to bring the thing that helped me the most at a price point that would have been approachable to me at the time, right? So my coach was a Sandler coach, and Sandler's expensive. And way back in the day, it was expensive then, right? I mean, I couldn't afford $1,500 a month in coaching at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I could have afforded $150, right? So Sales Practice Lab is $150 per month, right? And you get 2 Zoom calls a week with me, with other sales professionals, with people that are on the path, and I make people practice, right? You might be practicing your talk tracks. Sometimes I like to mix it up, and you got to sell someone else's thing for this part of the segment and everything, but it's bite-sized chunks so we get more reps under our belts because we need reinforcement, we need consistency, and we need some volume. One big long 45-minute role play isn't really helping all that much, right? So find the chunks, find the little ways to practice. So $150 a month. And it's one of those things that like I love I love so much because it helps me like it always keeps me, progressing and learning and challenging myself and everything. And there's a lot of people who have been like, well, hey, uh, I can't afford it. Okay, cool. I get it. Let me talk to your boss. Well, John, my boss doesn't want to talk about this. Cool. I get it. I've been there. This is $150. If you can't afford $150, I'm sorry, you're not taking it seriously enough and you're probably going to fail.
Mm-hmm. 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 Whatever wraps up today's episode, my friend, we talked about quite a few things. We talked about the power of communication. We talked about coaching. We talked about how to learn more about yourself to become a better, more effective, more human salesperson. We talked about, the power of being able to have strong accountability devices in your circle, being able to create both confidence and certainty as a salesperson, being able to associate that well, but also getting an opportunity to be able to know what you need out of other people in your sales and coaching world. Man, that's like a smorgasbord of cool stuff, man.
Thank you,
Um,
man. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and like nerd out at this level, right? Because as a sales coach, I get to talk about these things, right? And I talk about them with clients, but there's a level of depth here, Pierre, that like doesn't show up in most of my other conversations with sales professionals, man. So I really just appreciate the opportunity to come on and share.
the pleasure's all mine. All right, so like, if you guys have found this thing useful, which I'm sure you did, like, subscribe, make sure you comment below with your thoughts and takeaways. Well, it really, really helps to produce the channel, all that kind of cool stuff. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about is we're going to talk about the power of hypnosis in sales and selling. So until the next time, I want you to know that you're always closer than you think. Have a great day.